Hi everybody, welcome to this week's lesson on perfect competition. And so in this chapter we're going to look at how perfect competition works and why it's important in understanding real-world markets. You'll learn how perfectly competitive firms decide how much to produce, also what happens when new firms enter or existing ones leave the market, and also how these markets end up being very efficient, meaning resources are used in the best possible way. So perfect competition means there are many sellers in the market. It's easy for new firms to enter or existing ones to leave. Also, all products are identical and each firm is a price taker, meaning that they must accept the market price. And a good example of a perfectly competitive market is a farmer's market. So I did mention price taker in the previous slide. So basically a price taker is a seller that has no control over the market price. This means that they need to accept whatever price is set by supply and demand in the market. And so in perfect competition, there are so many sellers offering identical products that no single firm can raise or lower the price. And if a firm does try to charge more, buyers are going to simply go to another seller. If it charges less, it just earns less profit. And since the price is the same at all quantities demanded, the demand curve for each firm is perfectly elastic, which just means that it's a horizontal straight line. And so again, just to reiterate, in perfect competition, the firms are price takers and prices are set by the industry. So if the industry of all firms, their equilibrium price is $10, then generally that's going to be the price set by that business. So when a perfectly competitive firm sells one more unit, that extra revenue it earns, called marginal revenue, stays the same. So for example, the first unit might earn $10 and the second unit also earns $10. So the marginal revenue is constant at $10. And that's why we see this horizontal demand curve. And so all this means is that total revenue increases at a steady rate as more units are sold, and marginal revenue is equal to average revenue, which is also the market price. And so it's important to note that with the perfectly competitive firm, your marginal revenue, MR, equals demand, which is the same as your average revenue, which is also the same as the price. And so in the previous slide, we saw that in a perfectly competitive market, the demand curve for a single firm is perfectly elastic, or it's just a simple horizontal flat line at the market price. And so here at the bottom, again, this is just a reiteration of the previous slide where we had your marginal revenue is the same as demand, which is the same as average revenue, as well as price for a perfectly competitive market. And the acronym here is Mr. DARP. So MR, marginal revenue, equals demand, equals average revenue, equals our market price. And so in the short run, the goal of every business is to make as much profit as possible. And to do that, firms need to find the right level of output, or the point where the extra revenue from selling one more unit equals the extra cost of producing it. And then, so that's just where your marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And that's the point at which profits are their highest. In the short run, every business aims to produce the quantity of output where your marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And so MR equals MC is the profit maximizing rule. If the marginal revenue is greater than the marginal cost, then the firm should produce more. However, if marginal cost is greater than marginal revenue, the firm should produce less. And so when MR equals MC, the firm is producing the perfect amount to maximize profit. And so if we take a look at this firm graph here on the bottom right, remember that your marginal revenue for a perfectly competitive firm equals D, or demand. And so the point at which they cross is right about here, where your MC intersects with your demand or your marginal revenue. And so let's take a look here at this graph. In a perfectly competitive firm, to figure out how much output needs to or should be produced, again, we're going to look for where your MC intersects with your MR. And in that case, that is right here. As for the quantity, we have our quantity on our x-axis and then your price up on your left vertical axis. So the quantity at which the perfectly competitive firm should produce, again, that's where your MC, this red line here in this example, crosses your MR, which is this horizontal line. So if we look at this intersection and then you go all the way down, that is equivalent to a quantity of 9 in this example. And so 9 is the quantity that this perfectly competitive firm should produce. Now, as for total revenue, we can calculate total revenue by, again, looking at where your marginal cost intersects or equals your marginal revenue. We're going to take that quantity of 9, we go straight down, and then as for the price, we go straight across to the left, and at that intersection of MC equals MR, that happens to be a price of 7. And so we simply calculate 7 times 9, and this gives us a total revenue of $63. When we want to think about total cost, what we need to do is to take a look at our profit maximizing quantity. So our profit maximizing quantity, again, that's the quantity at which your marginal cost equals marginal revenue. And here that was a quantity of 9. And then what we need to look at is the price at which that quantity is on our average total cost curve. So if we're looking at this intersection here and we go straight down, this is where our average total cost curve hits a quantity of 9. And at this point here, if we go all the way to the left and we take a look at the price for our average total cost at a quantity of 9, this gives us 5. And so for our total cost, we're going to take 5 times 9, and this gives us a total cost of $45. As for calculating profit, there are a couple of ways we can do this. We can either take the total revenue and subtract the cost, Remember, our total revenue from the previous slide showed us that total revenue was $63. And $63 in total revenue minus the total cost of $45 gives us a profit of $18. Another way to calculate profit would be to visualize it just as we've done here. And so remember, this area here is our total cost. Your total profit is the difference between your total revenue and your total cost. And so if this whole area, this entire square, is your total revenue, and this is your total cost area in yellow, the profit is simply going to be this price, 7 minus 5, which is $2, and $2 times a quantity of 9 also gives us $18. Okay, and so let's talk a little bit more about total revenue. So as a perfectly competitive firm produces more, its total revenue increases at a constant rate because the market price stays the same, and that's for every unit sold. And so the firm can sell as much as it wants at that price. And profits are highest or losses are smallest at the output where your total revenue is farthest above total cost. And so again, just to reiterate, profits are highest when the firm produces at the point where marginal revenue, which equals price in perfect competition, is the same as marginal cost. And so that's the sweet spot where the business is making the most it can without increasing its costs more than revenue. And so when the market price is higher than a firm's average cost, it means the business is making more than its cost to produce each unit. So basically, it's earning a profit. The higher the price stays above its average costs, the more profit the firm makes in the short run. And this can attract new firms to enter the market over time. And so again, just to reiterate, as long as your marginal revenue, which is also demand or average revenue and price, so as long as your demand or market price is above your average total cost curve at that equilibrium profit maximizing price and quantity. So here 14 is greater than this 10. So it's going to earn a profit. If for whatever reason the price is below average total cost, the firm is losing money. And so even if it's losing money, if it's still above your average variable cost, it's worth continuing to produce for now, because at least it can cover its basic operating costs, and it's going to lose less than if they stopped or shut down completely. And so here, let's take a look at this example where we have our MR. It hits MC here. And so notice that it is below our average total cost, but it's still above your average variable cost. And so the firm is losing money, but they shouldn't close down yet. So when the market price drops below a firm's average cost, it means that the business isn't making enough to cover what it costs to produce each unit. Basically, it's losing money, and the firm might keep going for a while if it can still pay for its basic expenses. But if prices stay too low too long, it'll eventually have to leave the market. And so here we can see that our marginal revenue, our demand, price, and average revenue, notice that at the point at which it intersects with marginal cost, it is below the average variable cost as well as your average total cost. And so in this case, that firm should exit the market and shut down. And so this salmon area here, this is the losses that that firm is generating.